Every so often I get a voicemail that really sticks out to me. And that was certainly the case with the voicemail that I'm going to feature in this episode. Now, there's a lot of things you can do to really stick out to me and get featured on this podcast. You can have an interesting situation. You can have a funny situation. You can have really good audio. There's a lot of different things that I kind of take into account. But this one took the cake because you can hear the frustration and anger in this woman's voice. And her situation's kind of funny at the same time and interesting at the same time. This situation really had it all. Now, what we're going to talk about today is texting. Texting is a thing that a lot of people struggle with when it comes to getting their ex-boyfriends back. They don't know what to say, how to say it, or what to do. And even though I can't really cover all of those things in one podcast episode, I can introduce you to them. And that's what I'm going to attempt to do here. This woman essentially talked to me about her entire conversation with her ex, and it went completely wrong. And so what we're going to do today, and I've never done anything like this, so this is kind of a first here for the Ex-Boyfriend Recovery Podcast, is we're going to take those 4 text messages that were sent. Because remember, this conversation did not go well, so it didn't really last very long. And I'm going to dissect what she did wrong and kind of give you some insight into what her ex-boyfriend was thinking. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our really, really great anonymous caller. I'm totally leaving that in, by the way. Our anonymous caller. I can't believe I said that. I'm going to introduce you to our anonymous caller who has a question about texting.
Hi, so I started no contact. I did 30 days, and then I texted today my ex, and I wrote, I just drove past you in Glenroy. Hang on, sorry. The text was, I just drove past you in Glenroy, hope you're well. Then he replied half hour later, Glenroy, I think you got the wrong person. Then I wrote, oops, could have sworn it was you. Car reminded me of the night I was in my bathrobe. And then he wrote, who the is this? I don't know what to do now. Please help.
Okay, wow, that is one heck of a situation. It definitely did not go well, and we're going to talk about that and hopefully give you some understanding of what went wrong, what you could have done better, and what's going on in his mind to make him act or say the things that he's saying. So the first thing I want to do is commend you on the no contact rule. I know that's a really difficult time to go through. The only thing that I can really, and you didn't really mention anything about this, but the only thing that I can really kind of advise you on with the no contact rule is ask you a simple question. What significant changes have happened? If you are the same version of yourself that you were during the relationship and you just ignored him for 30 days, that is actually not enough anymore with the no contact rule. We become a lot more advanced in our understanding of the no contact rule and what really works to get an ex back. And oftentimes, personal growth and development has to happen during this time of period where you are ignoring your ex. So if you didn't do anything like that and you approached him and tried to text him, we've found that things tend not to go really well. Whereas if you have created a lot of personal growth and development during the no contact rule and then you text him, you're in a much better frame of mind, you're more confident, and things just end up going better. Now, you didn't really talk much about that. Mostly you were talking about your text message conversation that went horribly wrong. So let's talk a little about that. The one thing I want you to understand here about texting is it's almost like a little chess match. And every single text you send gives you a piece of information. And based on that information that you get, it essentially informs your next move. So if things are going well, then usually you know you need to pull back and retreat and try to figure something else out. If things are going good, then you know you can kind of keep advancing. And the idea here is you want things to continue to go good so you can kind of advance up the value chain. Of course, you wouldn't be calling me if things went really well. Things went disastrously bad. So here's what I'm going to do. 4 texts were sent here. Text number 1 was, you said, I just drove past you in Glenroy. Hope you are well. Okay? To which he responds, Glenroy, I think you got the wrong person. And then you wrote, which this is where things really started going wrong. Oops, could have sworn it was you. Kind of reminded me of the night that I was in my bathrobe. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I just basically made love to the camera right there. Okay. And then he responds, who the F is this? And that's when you know it really went wrong. So I'm going to take you text by text and explain what you didn't do right, what you did do right, and what he's thinking. So let's start. So I've written a lot about this on ex-boyfriend recovery, and I've even done podcast episodes about it because this is really where women struggle the most. So when women do the no contact rule, they're ignoring their ex from 21 to 45 days, any kind of time frame in between that. And after that, I recommend, okay, now it's time to text your ex. And then you have that ultimate question. Well, what do I text him? And this is something that women struggle with a lot. So you are definitely not alone in this, Anonymous, and you did make some mistakes here. So your first text to him was, I just drove past you in Glenroy. Hope you are well. Now here's the problem with that. Number one, there's nothing interesting about that. There's nothing that makes him want to actively respond. Number two, you didn't follow my protocol on first contact text messages. So let's talk about this. Your first contact text message, the first message that you basically text to your ex after the no contact rule, has to be interesting. It has to be so interesting that he'll actively want to respond to you in a positive manner. And I've come up with this really special protocol for doing this. So you're going to utilize 4 things when you're creating your text message. Your knowledge of your ex. So you're going to play onto your knowledge of him. What does he like? What does he dislike? And you're going to try to incorporate that into the text in some way, shape, or form. Then number 2, a story. People I've found really respond well to stories. If you really want to connect with someone or build rapport with someone, telling a story is the way to go. And generally, if it's a really interesting story, you're going to get a really interesting response. So right now we have 2. You're going to utilize the knowledge that you have of your ex already and incorporate it into a story. Number 3 is you're going to use an action phrase. So you want to start off your text with, oh my God, or you won't believe what I just saw. An action phrase like this creates interest. And you want your ex-boyfriend to be interested in what you have to say. What is your first reaction when I say, oh my God, you're not going to believe what I just saw? Well, your first reaction is, hey, what did you see? You want to know. It creates interest, intrigue. And I would liken this to kind of a pattern interrupt. So a pattern interrupt is, imagine that you were walking up to a group of friends, okay? And these group of friends all knew each other and they were talking amongst themselves. And you were walking up and you just try to get into the middle of the conversation, but everyone is talking amongst themselves and you really can't get their attention onto you. Now, compare that when you walk up to them and then you do this. You snap. Immediately, they stop talking and they look directly at you. The action phrase is meant to do this. Oh my God. Snap. You're not going to believe what I just saw. Snap. It's snapping his attention to you. And then you tell your story, of which you, of course, use your knowledge of him. And then finally, you're going to tie it in. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky. You're going to say something like, yeah, that was the first time you popped in my head in a while. Now, I realize this is a little bit confusing, so I think it's best if I do this in a cohesive manner. So imagine you decide to send this text to your ex-boyfriend. He's a big fan of, let's say, Game of Thrones. You are not going to believe what I just saw. To which he responds, what? I just saw the most epic marathon of Game of Thrones, and it totally reminded me of that time that I was at your house and we just binge-watched the entire series. It was the first time I thought about you in a while. Now, this text is going to do a number of things. One, you are intriguing him with the action phrase. You're intriguing him with a pattern interrupt, something that's going to make him snap to attention and respond to you. Next, you're going to tell a little quick story about the time you saw this really awesome Game of Thrones marathon on the television, which you know he's a big Game of Thrones fan. And you're going to bring him back into a memory, a good memory of when the two of you binge watched it at his house. And then finally, you're going to tie it back in to you, where you're going to say, yeah, it was the first time I thought about you in a while. Now, the important part of this tie-in, it was the first time I thought about you in a while, is the fact that you haven't talked to him in a month. Okay? So if you say that, he's going to think, wait, you haven't been thinking of me this entire time? And that's kind of where you want him. So your text, your problem was, this is what you texted your ex. I just drove past you in Glenroy. Hope you are well. That is a normal text message. We need to be more creative and have more thought. And of course, he didn't really respond too well to it. Now, his second text was, Glenroy, I think you may have the wrong person. Now, remember what I said at the beginning of this episode, how every single text message you get is a piece of information. Okay? Now, this is a vital piece of information, a piece of information that you ignored. And this is where you really went wrong. Now, there's nothing wrong with the fact that you went wrong. Everyone makes mistakes. All I want for you is to learn from the mistake. So the piece of information that you didn't pick up on is someone who says, Glenroy, I think you may have the wrong person, is indicative of someone who doesn't know who you are. So usually, and I know this really well because I got a new phone at the beginning of the year, right? And I'm always getting these phone calls from people wanting to speak to the previous owner of the phone. So I'm getting text message, phone calls, all for someone who isn't me. It's for someone who previously owned the phone. Okay? And so I am used to getting wrong numbers. So I'm constantly saying, oh, I think you may have the wrong person. This seems like that is what is happening here. So it seems to me like either he has blocked your number or erased your number, so he doesn't know what your number looks like. He doesn't have you in his phone anymore. This is a vital piece of information. And it's a piece of information that you didn't pick up on. So what's the best play here? Well, let's imagine that you got this piece of information. The mistake you made was you continued to go forward. What you should have done was retreated and come up with another game plan. That would be the smart way to approach it. The only fly in the ointment, so to speak, is every time you come up with a game plan, especially when you're trying to get next back, a lot of variables will change and something won't go according to your ultimate plan. For example, things didn't go according to your plan right here. You were expecting him to say something like, so your first text was, hey, I just drove past you in Glenroy, hope you are well. And you were expecting him, hopefully, to say, oh, that's so sweet, thank you for thinking of me. But he didn't. He essentially gave you the response of, wrong number. Now, the smart move there is to retreat, regroup, and come up with another game plan. You went forward, and this is really where you made your biggest mistake. Your biggest mistake was with the third text message. Now, this third text message, I'm not quite sure what you were trying to accomplish, but your third text message says, oops, could have sworn it was you, which it seems like you knew that the wrong number was prevalent, but you decided to go forward anyways. So you said, oops, could have sworn it was you. It reminded me of that time I was in my bathrobe. Now, there's a lot of mistakes here. I don't know if you were trying to use some sort of jealous text or be flirty or sexual in nature or something, but it didn't play well. Oftentimes when you're going to try to be sexual in this nature, you need to have built up rapport. You wouldn't try to ask someone on the first date to marry you, right? You would have to build up rapport, trust first. Same kind of thing goes with flirting and doing sexual messages like this. Okay, you need to build up more rapport. So essentially, this was way too much, way too soon. And the bathrobe, it has no tie-in to what you were talking about before. It's out of left field. You were just saying, hey, I just saw you, I just drove past you in Glenroy. And he just said, no, you didn't. And then you start talking about being in your bathrobe, which is very sexual in nature. Now, I understand you were probably trying to be flirty, and it's often said that, tears are a woman's greatest weapon, but sex is also a woman's greatest weapon, right? And I think you were trying to use that. You were trying to use that to your advantage and hopefully get him to show some interest back. The thing is, he didn't. He responded very, very negatively, which we'll talk about in 1 second. First things first, I want to explain to you why I would never recommend this text even if things were going well. So first off, the sexual in nature texts, it's really tricky because you have to have a lot of rapport built. And I always think, especially when text, it's always kind of fun when you're a little cheeky and a little flirtatious in nature. You're being very kind of forward here with your bathrobe comment. And believe it or not, it's not the craziest thing I've ever seen a woman text to an ex, but the bathrobe thing is so far out of left field. It would have made a little bit more sense if you were talking about baths and something like that where you could tie it in, but this really had no place in the conversation, and he didn't respond well to it. Let's talk about that right now. So the fourth text that he sends you, the fourth text in the string of texts that we are talking about here is, who the F is this? Except it wasn't just F, it was the F-U. You know what I'm saying. The cuss word. All right. This is indicative of a man who has been angered, okay, and creeped out. So him being angry and creeped out by you is definitely not the reaction that you want him to have when you're texting. I always say on the first contact text message, end the conversation when you get your chance. Okay, so end the conversation first and soon. You want it to be a really short reintroduction to you, and then the next day you'll start to kind of rebuild that rapport, and then every subsequent day you're going to slowly get deeper and deeper into texting him. You want to take things really slow at first, and you probably would have continued to text him. And that's a mistake. But he essentially cut the conversation off when he said, who the F is this? Now I want you to look at this from his perspective. Imagine that you got a text message from a stranger, someone who you didn't know who it was. Okay? And then you tried to explain to the person, hey, I think you have the wrong number. And the person just continues to go and gets sexual in nature. Would that creep you out? Especially being a woman, I'm pretty sure you'd be a little creeped out. And that's what he's displaying here. He's displaying someone who doesn't know who he's talking to, who just got really sexual, and it creeps him out. So here's what we can learn from this string of text messages. Number one, the first contact text message is vitally important, and it's something that you didn't really do a great job of. I believe it was, I drove past you in Glenroy. That really is not a great first contact text message. Now, it's not anything against you. I understand a lot of women have issues with texting their exes, especially with that first contact text message. In fact, I've even recorded a podcast on how to conduct a first contact text message, a perfect one. And you didn't do that. And that's where things started to go wrong, and they spiraled down. And you didn't leave the conversation, which, again, is something that you can correct. These are things that are correctable. Okay? Now, his reaction to you is understandable. Don't take it personally. I suppose the question that you're wondering at this point is, do I have a chance? Your chances just took a massive hit. I'm not going to lie to you. You only get so many chances at a first contact text message. I would say you get probably 2 or 3 chances tops. So it's a vitally important aspect. And a lot of women fail when they get to this aspect. They're expecting the no contact rule is supposed to do all the work for them, but it doesn't, and it never will. Yes, there will always be those outliers where all they have to do is ignore their ex for 30 days and bam, the ex comes back. But there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. So if I was you, I would approach it like there is no guarantee that that's going to happen. Really work on your first contact text message. Now, do you have a chance? Getting back to my original point, you still have a chance, but it took a hit, okay? Really what you can do is take the information that you have from this experience. You know that he doesn't know who you are. So to me, that means he's erased your number. He hasn't blocked you, because if he blocked you, he wouldn't have responded. He erased your number, probably in anger, due to the breakup, which is an understandable reaction. I just told an embarrassing story on my last podcast episode where I did something like this. Okay? So take that information, and with your first contact text message going forward, reintroduce yourself. Use your name. Hey, if your name is Chloe, Chloe. and then weave it into your first contact text message, because you have a vital piece of information. The fact that he has erased your number, he doesn't know who this is, okay? So use that information that you have. Text messages is nothing but a chess match, and the best players are the ones who win. That's going to do it for this episode of the Ex-Boyfriend Recovery Podcast. Thank you for listening. I had a blast filming this and recording it. If you have any questions, please visit our website, exboyfriendrecovery.com. Ask a question there. We do our best to answer every single question. And if you like this podcast and you want it to continue, I highly encourage you to go to iTunes and leave us a review. An honest one. That's all we ask.